Falcon and Winter Soldier is the latest Disney Plus series from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where it takes place 6 months after Avengers Endgame, showing us how Sam Wilson comes to terms with being Captain America in a world that's desperately looking for a heroic figure, but also one that might not accept him being Captain America. The Captain America stuff is by far my favorite aspect of the MCU. I love the exploration of American patriotism and how it coincides with American history, exploring both the good side and bad side of patriotism, and how it can be used to comment on what's going on in our modern world. And to my knowledge, I think that's how it is more or less in the comics as well. And obviously I was really interested and excited to see how they were going to use Sam Wilson in order to find out his own way to become the new Captain America, while also trying not to be Steve Rogers. Also partnering up with Bucky Barnes and dealing with a radical terrorist group called the Flag Smashers, and another guy that takes on the Captain America mantle for a while, John Walker. More on that guy later. And it also continues to flesh out certain aspects of the MCU that were briefly touched upon in previous movies, all compiled into a 6-episode arc. So the show takes place about 6 months after Avengers Endgame. Sam apparently had accepted being Captain America at the end of Endgame when Steve gave him the shield, but now we're seeing that he's actually having doubts about taking up the mantle and whether or not he's actually worthy to carry that shield, which I would buy that he would have some doubts. To follow in the steps of someone like Cap, who did a lot of good for not just America, but for the whole world, that's a lot to live up to. So ultimately he decides to give the shield to the United States government, thinking that it's just going to be on display for the rest of the world to see. Only then, to his disappointment as well as Bucky's, they decide to give it to an Army veteran, John Walker, and make him Captain America, played by Wyatt Russell, Kurt Russell's son. Since now both father and son have a place in the MCU, if you don't remember, Kurt Russell was Ego in Guardians Volume 2. Why not just get Wyatt's mother, Goldie Hawn? Now for starters, the dynamic between Sam and Bucky is just perfection. I adore it. I love their back and forth, how they bounce off each other, because initially they didn't really like each other that much in Civil War, and it's pretty evident here, but as the show goes on, they learn to respect each other. And the stare down between the two of them in the therapy session was some of the best dialogue that I think the MCU's ever put out.
That is everything he stood for. That is his legacy. He gave you that shield and you threw it away like it was nothing. So maybe he was wrong about you, and if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me.
Sam is trying to help his sister rebuild their family business by rebuilding the boat that their family left them, and I absolutely loved what they did with Bucky in this show. This actually made me truly understand and appreciate Bucky as a character, even though we kind of got some of that in Civil War, and we saw hints of what he did as the Winter Soldier over the course of the 20th century. But now, we actually get to see a flashback of him during one of his missions. Because the first when they showed it, I thought, oh my god, they retracted it, no! But then it took me a second to realize, wait a minute. That's a flashback. And they show that one of the guys that he kills, and he's actually befriended this guy's father. Does he tell this guy that he killed his son or not? All part of his recovery. Trying to make amends with people that he wronged in the past, as mandated by the United States government, otherwise he'll go back to prison. I actually know people who go to recovery groups, and just a little personal info about me, I've been in some of those groups too. Trying to process certain things that I've struggled with throughout my life. So when I saw Bucky carrying an amends list, that was just... There are no words to describe how that made me feel. It was just so neat to see something like that portrayed in the MCU. Not that it hasn't been shown in entertainment before, but the fact that Marvel is willing to play along those lines a little bit, that just meant a whole lot to me, personally. And as I said, with the dynamic between Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie, it's so, so great. And I think they work so perfectly together.
So who are you fighting now, Gandalf?
How do you know about Gandalf?
I read The Hobbit in 1937 when it first came out.
So you see my point?
No, I don't.
And that's just another reminder of how old he really is. And I love the throwback to the moving the seat up scene in Civil War, where this time it's done to Sam instead of Bucky.
You're not gonna move your seat up, are you?
No.
I was howling with laughter when I saw that. And some other characters return from previous movies, such as Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl. And they basically use him to try to track down the Flag Smashers that are causing havoc out there in the world, since he might know a thing or two about what they're doing. Daniel Bruhl is very subdued. He's not showy, he's not acting up for the camera. It's a character that's really hard to lock down. You can't really tell if you're supposed to root for this guy or root against him, but he's more or less a necessary evil in order to get the job done. And the scene where he starts dancing in the nightclub, no surprise that there was gonna be a meme that came out of it. And sure enough, it was. Just put that along with the Tobey Maguire memes and the Chris Pratt memes, you got the Holy Trinity. of parody. We also get to see him use his purple mask for a brief moment in time. Just another little thing that Marvel likes to throw in there for the fans while also doing their own thing. Sharon Carter shows up for a little bit. She was branded a fugitive by the government after the Sokovia Accords, and it's revealed that she's the power broker of sorts. They hint at the power broker throughout the show, but then like towards the next to last episode, I think they kind of make it clear that she is the power broker. Not exactly good, but not exactly bad. She ends up getting a pardon from the government once she's returned, and she calls her one contact saying that she's going to reveal the United States government's secrets to the rest of the world. I'm assuming that's going to tie into another future Marvel entry at some point later on. Similar, I guess, to John Walker getting the US agent title also. And Backtrack the Leaper also shows up to fight Sam a few times throughout the show. A mercenary for hire hired by Carly Morgenthau to handle some of her dirty work. And some of the fight scenes involving him and Sam are really exciting. And it's very much in vein with what the Russo brothers did with Winter Soldier and Civil War. The tone, the vibe, the musical score. I know they're taking a break from Marvel, but it does kind of feel like they came back to the set and were hanging around the set directing a few scenes. And it continues to touch on the themes of the dark side of patriotism and the morally gray areas of American history, particularly in the character of Isaiah Bradley, who Sam ends up meeting. And this guy, who's a Korean War veteran, turned out to be a super soldier that was experimented on at the time, only then to be thrown to the curb by the United States government, considering the time period that he was experimented on, right around the time of the Civil Rights Movement. And his history plays into how Sam ends up later taking on the Captain America mantle. Isaiah was basically treated like garbage, serving a country that didn't really see any value in him. And he tells Sam in more ways than one, America will never accept a black Captain America. If they can't accept me serving their country, how could they do the same for you? And I also think it's a commentary on how black people feel in America today, whereas how we've made a lot of progress in that area, but there's still a lot of old wounds and scars that need to be addressed, and they feel like their needs aren't being addressed, or that they never will be. Sam has to acknowledge that yeah, there's probably going to be some people out there that won't like the fact that I'm Captain America just because I'm a black man. But ultimately what he settles on, he has to follow Steve's example, doing what he feels is right for the greater good. And that is why I think Sam Wilson is an appropriate choice to take on the Captain America mantle. Just like Dr. Erskine said in First Avenger, not a perfect soldier, but a good man. And the payoff that they give to Isaiah by showing a statue in his honor at the Smithsonian Institute literally brought tears to my eyes. Such a beautiful moment. Let's talk about John Walker. This is a character that is probably the most despicable that I've seen in recent memory. He is just so arrogant, so hot-headed, and very narcissistic, although not exactly in the likable way that Tony Stark was, the antithesis of Captain America, and basically has little to no moral code to do as little harm as possible. Major props to Wyatt Russell. He plays it very, very well. And John Walker may not be the most likable guy, but he is very layered too, and how he does feel a burden to live up to that mantle. But he has a tendency to choose the darker side of his heart. He ends up getting his hands on one of the vials of the formula, and then when he and his friend Lamar end up fighting some of the Flag Smashers, Carly ends up killing his friend Lamar, and John goes on a complete rampage chasing after her, only to find another Flag Smasher, and uses the shield to kill him. One of the most jaw-dropping things and one of the most brutal things that Marvel has done since the Netflix Daredevil series. I sat there for a good 5 minutes with my mouth hanging open. And this image, absolutely haunting. And when you realize that all those people standing around there seeing it happen with their phones out, there's no going back from this now. The fight scene that ensues in the following episode between him and Sam and Bucky, one of the most nail-biting sequences the MCU has ever shown. After he loses the shield, he's demoted and thrown to the curb, only then to be recruited by Valentina Allegra DeFontaine, played by the one and only Julia Louis-Dreyfus, also known as Elaine from Seinfeld. The fact that Julia Louis-Dreyfus is now in the MCU, if Marvel has her in their wheelhouse, get Jerry Seinfeld, Jason Alexander, and Michael Richards. Marvel, please make that happen. But John Walker eventually ends up being redeemed in some way at the climax of the show when he finally gets a chance to kill Carly, but he decides to help Sam and Bucky save these innocent people that were trapped at the UN, and is later designated as US agent who has to report to DeFontaine. I'm assuming that's a thing in the comics with John Walker, probably the most suitable, because this guy isn't exactly a choir boy. For someone to be Captain America, you can't exactly have a not-so-great track record. Hence why Sam, as opposed to Bucky, got the shield. And I loved the Captain America costume that Sam wears. The fan inside me was squealing with joy. When he opens the briefcase that the suit is in, and we don't see it at first, instantly took me right back to Pulp Fiction. Vincent, we happy? We happy. And one thing I haven't talked about yet, Carly Morgenthau, played by the actress who was also in the Han Solo movie. I wasn't really a fan of hers for a little while. It was when she had her first conversation with Sam about why she feels right in what she's doing. That's when I started to really sympathize with her. She and the Flag Smashers are basically trying to restore the world back to the way it was during the 5-year time jump between Thanos making the snap and then the Hulk bringing everybody back. All these refugees that found their way across the borders when half of the world population was gone. Now that everybody's back, the world governments are throwing them back into the places where they came from initially. Carly is not too happy about that. She wants to stop the GRC at all costs from achieving their goal. And after she's killed at the climax, Sam finally understands what she was intending to do, albeit the wrong way. He calls the government officials out on their BS and their unwillingness to just go right to the point and get the problem solved. All the while, these news broadcasters are capturing it on camera and everybody's watching it happen. I love this moment because once I realized that, I thought, yeah, there's no way you guys are weaseling your way out of this.
Look, you people have just as much power as an insane god or a misguided teenager. The question you have to ask yourself is, how are you going to use it?
If it isn't obvious now, I really enjoyed that. And as a result, the world accepts him as the new Captain America. Bucky finally makes amends with the guy whose son that he killed, and Zemo kills the remaining Flag Smashers to get rid of all traces of the super soldier serum with the help of his butler. For all intents and purposes, you gotta admit, the guy's very clever. As far as problems with the show, it's really the length of it. This could have benefited, I think, from maybe being 10 episodes instead of 6. Episodes 1 through 5, I was fine with the pace of it. Episode 6, to me, feels like a huge race to the finish line. And I felt like maybe an extra couple episodes would have given us some time to breathe. But other than that, I really enjoyed the show. There's talk about a possible season 2 or a Captain America 4. Whichever direction they decide to go in, I'm all for it. Oh, and the Rocky-like montage that Sam has with the shield, that was amazing. Those are my thoughts on Falcon and Winter Soldier. What are your guys' thoughts? Comment below and tell me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.